Hey guys, how's it going? Madalino back here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make coffee after very popular request. I'm sure many of you in the middle of finals right now, so this will be very helpful. And today I have my very own father here to help me. Say hi, Father.
Hi, Father.
Oh, what are we doing today, Father?
So we are making what's called cold brew coffee. What that takes is water, beans, something into which you can put the grounds and let it steep, and that's basically it, and time. So what the ratio is, it's 2 parts water to 3 parts beans. So what I have here is 2,500 milliliters of water filtered, and I've got 3.75 to 4 kilograms of beans, whole beans.
That's a lot of beans.
That's a lot of beans, but this is gonna make a lot of coffee. Ideally, it should last me a week, maybe 6 to 7 days, kind of thing. So if you wanted to only make 1 cup, you would take that ratio of 2 parts water to 3 parts beans and reduce the amounts of water and beans accordingly. And you could make, 2 cups of water or 2 cups of coffee.
Wow.
So what I do is I put some of these beans into the grinder and I grind them up to a medium grind, and I put them into this stainless steel pan. I kind of watch in here to make sure that it's not too fine, because if it's too fine, then the water takes out more of the bad tasting stuff faster. So keeping the grind medium is key for this kind of immersion coffee. And you repeat that process. As you can see, I've already done a bunch of the grinds, or grinding. And you repeat that process until you've got it all ground.
And how long does this process usually take you?
So this part here, after having figured out what the ratios were, well, that was the toughest thing for me. That took trial and error of several times. But after figuring that out, it was pretty easy to measure it, and then do this grinding. Takes about 10 minutes. What I try and do on the grinding like that is short pulses so that the beans don't get too hot from the grinder. And then the benefit of looking at it like this is I can see if some beans didn't get ground, so I'll put those back in. And then hit them up again real quick. Ta-da. And then I'll take my water and I will just pour it nice and evenly all over it. Eventually, this coffee, after it's made, will go back into this hydro flask and stay in the fridge, and that will produce a very strong coffee that I'll take. Sometimes I'll take it straight. Sometimes I will dilute it with like some hot water and make it a little weaker, if you will. So it's like the difference between drinking espresso or drinking Americano. So this essentially produces an espresso type robust coffee. What I'm doing here is just making sure that the water has hit all the beans. It's probably not necessary because osmosis and diffusion will do that over time, over the 12 hours. But I like to make sure that there aren't any big clumps of grounds that are avoiding the water. So I cover it up, and you can either leave this on the countertop 10 hours or so, 10 to 12 hours, or if you can put it in the fridge, that slows down the extraction process, and so leaving it in for 12 hours is okay if it's in the fridge. And so depending on how you're managing your time, you can leave it on the counter for about 10 hours or stick it in the fridge for 12 hours. And so now that the water's in here and the beans are steeping essentially, we're gonna cover it up and leave it for about 10 hours over here on the counter, and we'll see you tomorrow for part 2.
Ding.
2,000 years later.
So we've got our grounds from last night. We've got a pot with some cheesecloth on top to filter out the big parts of the grounds. And I've got this AeroPress filtering machine device with a paper filter that is made by this company called Arobi. Usually this is its own coffee making device, but I use it just for the filter so that I can filter out my cold brew. So I put this filter in here. What I do is I put a little water in there first to kind of get it wet. And then this goes into this handy dandy funnel. This is our hydro flask from last night where we measured out the water. I put that in there like that. I'll pour, you can just pour all this into the cheesecloth and then you have your coffee. I do this extra step here to take out more of the particulates, and I think it makes a smoother brew. So I'm carefully pouring the liquid into here. So it'll be about 4 cups of liquid in here. And while that's filtering, I'll take the grounds and scoop them out into the cheesecloth so that I can have more of the liquid to pour into the AeroPress. You can see that some of the bigger bits are still getting in there, and that's what I'm going to try to avoid by scooping the grounds out into the cheesecloth. You can see that the coffee's nice and dark colored, and it's not super light. So that's, I was saying yesterday that this is kind of like a espresso, it's like a big thing of espresso. So here I'm scooping these out. There's water in there. Hopefully that's a whole lot, but it'll eventually filter down through and then go through the cheesecloth and settle into the pot. So here, this scoop I had more water in there because I'm getting less grounds into this in this container.
And how long does this filtering process usually last?
Oh, this filtering process here takes me about 10 minutes. So one of the cool things about this AeroPress machine is that I can take this plunger and push more in through it. I like to leave that for the last part of the process so that I'd like to think that the gravity taking the water through the filter, through these filters, is less forceful, and so therefore I get a finer product. But this whole thing takes about 10 minutes, so we can break now and then you can come back and I'll show you how this part works. So I'm getting most of the grounds out of my stainless steel container here. Like I was saying, I could have just poured everything into the cheesecloth and then gone from there to pour the liquid into the AeroPress. But I like to think this is a little more efficient and time-wise and neater, and so that's why I do it like this. You can just take it all and dump it in there, and then pour the filter in that way. So you can see how this is already filtered out a little bit. So I'll put that in there, and eventually all the water that's still in these grounds gets into the pot. So now it's more of a clean filter that I can pour more of this into and keep that filtration process going. One of the things I like about cold brew is that you can have it straight like it is, cold, out of the fridge, or you can warm it up and have like a hot espresso. You can also dilute it with some water so it's not as strong, and you can kind of do it to taste. Also in summer months when it's super hot, you can have cold brew and you put ice in there, and it doesn't end up being this overly watered down coffee. It's just good tasting and cold.
Neat.
So I'm almost down to all the grounds getting out of this soaking pan, and it reminded me that one of the mistakes I used to make when I had this process was pinching this cheesecloth too taut, like it would be almost like a drum that you can beat on, and so this cheesecloth was all the way tight on top. Since then, I've learned that you put it in a little loose. So now instead of the grounds being like this big mound on top of a tight cheesecloth, I've got some room in there, and the grounds will end up being about this much into the pot, and there's still lots of room for the coffee, so it's not just the cheesecloth's not just sitting in the coffee. But that's a good balance there.
And why is it called a cheesecloth if you're using it for coffee?
That's a great question. So the original use of a cloth like this was for making cheese, and so they would use it to separate the inside this cloth would be the cheese, and it would separate from the curds and the other parts of the milk that are used in the cheese making process. But essentially it's just this great, filter that's used in other kinds of cooking. And so here you can see this part here. I'll show this, how this AeroPress works. And I'm doing all this in the sink because in case I spill something, it doesn't get all over the counter, and it's easier to clean up this way too. All this is almost pure liquid. The way this AeroPress works is I can put this in here like this. You can hear it forcing the coffee through the filter. And now it's ready for another one of these to go through. Usually, like I was saying earlier, I would let it sit and let gravity do the work. But if I'm in a hurry, I can always do it like this and push the liquid through the filter. You can also tell how saturated the filter is by how much pressure you need to put in order to push the liquid through. So this is actually pretty good. There's not a whole lot of particulates in the liquid that are causing the filter to be completely saturated. See how dark and yummy that looks? And you can use anything as your soaking vessel. You don't have to use a stainless steel pot or pan like this. We just happen to have one from this goes actually in a warming drawer out by the barbecue. So when food is done being cooked there, it goes into these pans. But you can use anything. You can even use a pot like this and then filter it out that way.
Now you're just getting the
last bits of the grounds and water out of there. So then now I can push this bit through and then get the cheesecloth up out of the pot and get at the coffee that's in the pot. So this is getting a little harder. I can feel that there's that the filter has saturated a little more. Sometimes I'd even take that a new filter and put it in. But for now, I'll just take out this filter or this cheesecloth. You want to be sure not to let the cheesecloth fall into the coffee, because that kind of just ruins all the filtration stuff that you did. So I kind of went overkill on these clips, but I think it's better to have more than less on the clips. And so in there, all that is good coffee. And like I said, you could have just used the cheesecloth completely to do your filtration. And this is completely drinkable coffee. But I throw it through this extra filtration process because we had the AeroPress. And see, look how clean that is. You can totally drink that, just straight. So this is the last bit from the pot. And again, you can see how clear that liquid is. You pretty much just drink that. And I would normally let it sit through that filter and filter out itself, just through gravity. So that's complete. And now you can see I've got exactly 2 liters or 1.9 liters worth of cold brew in there. You can see that I've got pretty much 1.9 liters of cold brew coffee ready to go in the fridge. That started out from 2,500 milliliters of cold filtered water combined with 3,750 grams of grounds soaked for 10 to 12 hours. And that's my process for making cold brew.
Did this last a whole week?
This will last me at least a week, sometimes more, depending on how much coffee I drink. But this will create at least 1 cup of coffee for 7 days, the way that I drink it. So sometimes I dilute it, sometimes I just have it straight and sip it as cold, and sometimes I put it on the stove and warm it up and sip it as I'm looking out the window at the sunrise.
Thanks for helping me.
So another benefit of doing this in the sink is that it's nice and easy to take all those grounds that were on the counter and just push them into the pan like this. And then these grounds themselves are actually really good for growing plants with. And so a composter that we put these into, or sometimes I just sprinkle them directly onto the plants because it gives good nitrogen and enriches the soil. So this is good stuff in more ways than just making coffee.
Good stuff for us, good stuff for the plants.